In recent years, the term woke has undergone a dramatic transformation. Originally a rallying cry for awareness of racial and social injustice, it has since become a loaded and controversial label. Especially in media and entertainment, woke has come to represent identity-focused storytelling that explicitly centers themes of race, gender, and social justice. While this approach was initially celebrated for promoting inclusion and diversity, there has been a growing backlash. Audiences are increasingly turning away from media perceived as overly moralistic, agenda-driven, or out of touch. But what exactly is causing the downfall of woke media? And what kind of content is emerging to replace it? The cultural shift towards wokeness in media began in earnest during the 2010s. Amidst global movements like Black Lives Matter, #MeToo, and increased attention on LGBTQ+ rights, media companies began aggressively investing in inclusive representation. Major studios cast more diverse leads, revamped classic franchises with progressive messaging, and produced stories that emphasize systemic oppression and social justice. This shift was seen in everything from blockbuster superhero films to indie dramas and even children's programming. Companies like Disney, Netflix, and HBO led the charge, attempting to reshape cultural narratives. In theory, this represented progress, more inclusive storytelling, broader representation, and an overdue correction of Hollywood's historical biases. However, as with many social movements that become commodified, the execution often fell short. As woke themes became marketable, they were frequently implemented superficially. Tokenism, preachy dialogue, and one-dimensional characters plagued many of these projects. Rather than fostering empathy, these stories often felt like lectures. By the early 2020s, the backlash against woke media had begun to gain significant momentum. Critics argued that entertainment was being sacrificed at the altar of ideology. Rather than focusing on compelling narratives or complex characters, many shows and films were being built around messaging first and story second. One of the key drivers of this backlash is audience fatigue. Viewers began to notice formulaic plot lines, moralizing monologues, and a consistent tone of cultural scolding. Instead of feeling seen or inspired, many felt patronized. Audiences tuned in for escapism and entertainment, but were instead confronted with what felt like activist messaging disguised as storytelling. Cultural rebellion also played a significant role. The pendulum of public sentiment often swings. As wokeness became institutionalized within media giants, the counterculture began to push back. Comedians, independent creators, and alternative platforms emerged, often ridiculing or rejecting mainstream narratives. Shows and films that bucked the trend, even if controversial, started to find dedicated audiences. This backlash wasn't limited to fringe internet corners. Box office results, ratings, and reviews began to reflect a growing disillusionment. Films that were marketed on the strength of their inclusive themes rather than narrative quality often underperformed. Meanwhile, content perceived as unapologetically entertaining or daring to challenge the dominant cultural script began to gain traction. At the heart of the failure of woke media lies a fundamental narrative tension: identity politics versus human complexity. While stories centered on race, gender, or sexuality can be deeply powerful, they often falter when characters are reduced to these traits. The most compelling stories don't preach, they explore. They allow characters to be flawed, multifaceted, and human. In contrast, woke media often feels the need to portray marginalized characters as morally superior, perfect victims, or symbols rather than people. This erodes relatability and dramatic tension. Moreover, the fixation on identity can lead to storytelling that feels alienating rather than inclusive. When narratives revolve around checklists of representation, they risk becoming didactic rather than organic. Viewers don't want to be told what to think. They want to be invited into a world and shown what to feel. Media is a business. And for much of the 2010s and early 2020s, woke sold. Corporations adopted progressive messaging not purely out of ethical obligation, but because it was profitable. diversity initiatives, inclusive marketing campaigns, and socially conscious branding aligned with a rising tide of younger, politically engaged consumers. But trends shift. As consumer frustration grows, so too does the corporate recalibration. Many studios and platforms are now pivoting away from overtly ideological storytelling in favor of broader appeal. This doesn't mean diversity is being abandoned, but it is being recontextualized. Economic performance also speaks volumes. High-profile flops of woke-branded content, such as the 2022 Batgirl cancellation or the lukewarm reception to shows like Velma, contrasted sharply with surprise hits like Top Gun, Maverick, which embraced traditional storytelling values with minimal political overtones. The political climate has also contributed. In polarized times, viewers increasingly interpret media through an ideological lens. Content perceived as pushing a particular agenda can quickly become a lightning rod for criticism, regardless of artistic merit. So if woke media is on the decline, what's taking its place? Character-driven storytelling. More creators are returning to basics: strong character arcs, nuanced dialogue, and moral complexity. These stories may still include diverse characters and social themes, but prioritize human connection and authenticity over messaging. Genre escapism. Audiences are embracing fantasy, sci-fi, horror, and thriller genres as vehicles for exploring big ideas without overt moralizing. Series like The Last of Us or films like Everything Everywhere All at Once blend social commentary with immersive worlds and emotional depth. Nostalgic traditionalism. There's a growing appetite for content that celebrates traditional heroism, family values, or simpler times. Think of the success of Top Gun, Maverick, or the return of sitcom formats. These works offer comfort amidst cultural and political chaos. Authentic representation. Instead of symbolic casting or checkbox diversity, viewers are gravitating towards stories where representation feels natural. This includes narratives written and directed by people from those communities, ensuring authenticity in voice and perspective. Creator-led platforms. Independent creators on platforms like YouTube, Substack, or Patreon are rising in influence. Free from corporate oversight, they often produce content that is politically eclectic, narratively daring, and culturally resonant. Dark comedy and satire. In an era of social tension, dark humor and satire are flourishing. Content that mocks extremism on all sides, while acknowledging the absurdity of modern life, feels refreshing. Think South Park, The Boys, or stand-up specials that defy groupthink. The decline of woke media doesn't signal a return to regressive values. Rather, it suggests a cultural hunger for sincerity, complexity, and entertainment that respects the audience's intelligence. The most successful media moving forward will be those that incorporate diverse perspectives without being consumed by them. Storytelling is most powerful when it transcends identity, not when it is limited by it. Audiences crave characters that reflect the full spectrum of human experience, their dreams, fears, flaws, and contradictions. The future of media lies in embracing that complexity. The backlash against woke storytelling is, in essence, a demand for better storytelling. Not less diversity, but more depth. Not less progress, but more substance. As the media landscape evolves, the winners will be those who tell the truth, not just in message, but in art. Woke media once represented a necessary correction in storytelling, pushing for voices and narratives long overlooked. But its decline reflects the limits of ideology-driven art when it sacrifices emotional truth and narrative cohesion. Audiences are not rejecting diversity or justice. They're rejecting shallowness, virtue signaling, and predictability. What's replacing it is more honest, grounded, and story-first media that doesn't condescend to its viewers. As creators pivot back toward character, complexity, and risk-taking, we may be entering a new golden age of storytelling. One where everyone belongs, but no one is reduced to just a symbol.